Good evening. For the next 2 hours, a chance to engage and discuss the issues with two leading third-party candidates. Our criteria here at C-SPAN quite simple. Those candidates whose name appears on the ballot in enough states to technically win the necessary 270 electoral votes to win the presidency. In our first hour, our conversation with Governor Gary Johnson, who is joining us from Santa Fe, New Mexico. In our second hour, Jill Stein, who is the Green Party nominee. But we begin with Governor Johnson and take you back to May of this year in Orlando, Florida, as he accepted his party's nomination.
I've always said that it's your hard work. It's every one of your work over the years that has gotten us to this point, and I recognize that. And I will work as hard as I can to represent everybody in this room. Look, for those that weren't supportive, I just want to reiterate a couple of things. I tell the truth. I am not a liar. And I make plenty of mistakes, but what I say here at this convention is what I say everywhere, wherever I go, and I believe it is a really libertarian message wherever I go. And right now, leaving this convention, I think that millions of people are going to be trying to understand what it is to be a libertarian, and it is going to be my voice describing that to the best of my ability. And I realize the confidence that you've put in me to be that spokesperson, and I'm very, very grateful of that.
Former Governor Gary Johnson, the Libertarian nominee, joining us from Santa Fe, New Mexico. Governor, thank you very much for being with us.
Stephen, we are on the ballot in all 50 states and the District of Columbia, so we're the only third party that can lay claim to that.
Is your voice being heard?
Oh, I think so. To the extent that it would have been heard if I would have been in the first two presidential debates, no. But we knew that this was an uphill battle, and it continues. 50% of Americans, when they're going to register to vote now, are registering as independent. 28% Democrats, 26% Republicans. Well, where is that independent representation? I happen to think it's the libertarian voice, and right now I'm leading among independents, so I'm really grateful for that.
You describe yourself on your website as, quote, a social liberal, a fiscal conservative, and a military isolationist. So let me take that third part, military isolationist. What does that mean for the U.S. military?
Well, yeah, and never use the term isolationist, never. So I don't know where you're reading that from, but how about a skeptic when it comes to our foreign policy? The fact that when we involve ourselves in regime change, in my lifetime, I can't think of a single example where that has worked out better and not worse. So involve ourselves diplomatically to the hilt, and that we should provide ourselves with an invincible national defense. Let's not put our military in a situation where they're caught in a Civil War crossfire and we're asking them to accomplish things that aren't defined at the very beginning. If I may use it as an example, Afghanistan. I think that's a great example of we were attacked. We attacked back. I supported Afghanistan. Al-Qaeda, we got in there to destroy Al-Qaeda. We destroyed them after 7 months. They were gone. We should have left Afghanistan after 7 months. Here we are 15 years later. I think that we should get out of Afghanistan. Iraq, on the other hand, when asked about Iraq after I left office in 2003, I said, you know, we have the military surveillance capability to see Iraq roll out any weapons of mass destruction. And if we do that, we can act accordingly. But I think if we go into Iraq, we're going to find ourselves in a civil war to which there will be no end. So a regime change, no. Isolationist, look, absolutely not, but non-interventionist, that's a big difference between isolationists. Free trade, that's how we're going to help the world out. Diplomacy, the only solution to Syria is joining hands with Russia to deal with that diplomatically. The only way to deal with North Korea is to join hands with China diplomatically with regard to Kim in North Korea.
Since we're on foreign policy, let's talk about Syria, because you've also been critical of Hillary Clinton, saying that she bears at least some of the responsibility for the thousands of civilian deaths in Syria. How so?
Well, arming the Free Syrian Army, when conjecture at the time was that these arms were going to end up in the hands of the Islamists, or these arms were going to end up in the hands of ISIS. And in fact, they have. The fact that we are now backing the Kurds against ISIS in Raqqa, well, the Kurds are sideways with our Turkish ally, which they're not such a good ally after we invaded Iraq, and arguably because of our invasion of Iraq, you had Saddam's henchmen that fled to that area and may have participated in the organization of what, like I say, 2 years ago we didn't even know the term ISIS. So we put ourselves in this situation where we're backing the Free Syrian Army, but they're arm in arm with the Islamists, and you've got a lot of civilians. This is a horrible situation. Look, Assad, a horrible human being, wreaking horrible tragedy, but what we did, arming the Free Syrian Army, those arms ending up in the hands of the in the hands of the Islamists and ISIS, has that made the situation better? No, it's made the situation worse.
We want to engage with our audience, also those listening on C-SPAN radio. Here are the numbers. If you're a supporter of the Johnson Weld ticket, the number to call is 202-748-8920. If you're a supporter of Hillary Clinton, 202-748-8921. And for Donald Trump supporters, the number to call is 202-748-8922. Also, you can join us on Twitter at C-SPAN. Let me ask you about your two moments on MSNBC. You were asked about Aleppo, and you said, what is Aleppo? And then you responded to the Syria question. And then with Chris Matthews asking about a foreign leader, and you referred to it as another Aleppo moment. Did that hurt you in the eyes of the public? Has that hurt you in your fall campaign?
Well, that I'm being I'm being made to look like somebody who doesn't understand what these situations are. You know, whether or not that hurts or not, look, if we're going to gauge the next president of the United States on their ability to dot the I's and cross the T's on foreign leaders and geographic locations, then we're going to continue to have the same foreign policy that we've had for basically my lifetime, which is supporting regime change. Who makes these decisions? I have no idea, but as Commander-in-Chief, I tell you what, I want to know, we'll honor all treaties and obligations, but untangling all these promises that have been made, I think requires someone like myself. I think I would be able to do this and get ourselves untangled. Steve, I think it's important to point out that among active military personnel, polling active military personnel, I am their next choice to be Commander-in-Chief. I'd like to think it's based on what I am saying, and that's what I'm saying right now.
Have you given any thought to who you would ask to serve in your cabinet, most notably as Secretary of State or Defense Secretary?
You know, I was really well served as governor of New Mexico, and I would like to point out to everybody, I was a two-term governor of New Mexico, Republican, served in a heavily Democrat state, never been involved in politics before. Bill Weld, my running mate, former two-term Republican governor serving in Massachusetts, a state that's 4-1 Democrat. Look, when I took office, I said there were no predisposed jobs, meaning we didn't make any promises for any jobs. Come apply. We're going to hire the best and the brightest, and I'm going to guess, I was really surprised by the quality of people, the depth and the quality of people that applied for jobs in state government. I'm going to guess that that same phenomenon will exist as President of the United States, filling all of these cabinet positions.
Is there a past Secretary of State or Defense Secretary that you think would be your model, the type of person you'd want to serve in your administration?
Well, I'll just, Mike Leavitt, who served as a former Secretary of Health and Human Services, I knew him as governor, and incredibly capable guy. And, looking at someone like that to possess those skills as Secretary of State. Steve, I've really been disillusioned, having never been involved in politics before, coming into office and then actually getting to meet people that I'd held up on pedestals, believing that they were all about advancing public policy for the public good. And I came to find out that they were more concerned with getting reelected. They were more concerned with polls. And that isn't to say I didn't meet a lot of really good people, but I have to say I'm skeptical about prior office holders, people that have served. I don't think we get the whole story. Today with the internet, we are more informed. We don't have to go through filters anymore. So, exciting times to be living in. I don't think we could be living in any more exciting times than today.
I have a couple of questions from the first two presidential debates, which we'll get to in just a moment, but a chance also for our C-SPAN audience to engage with you. And in our second hour, Dr. Jill Stein. Jaron is joining us, Cedar Hill, Texas. Good evening.
Oh, good evening. Am I on? Am I on?
Sure? Yes, please go ahead, Jaron.
Yes. I am a Johnson Weld supporter, and I've really been one of your most vocal supporters. I comment on a lot of your Facebook posts, and I've really admired your honesty. And it's always like I say, I quote Benjamin Franklin, honesty is the best policy. I'm a disgruntled Democrat. I'm a recovering Republican. I've been a Democrat, and I really just can't bring myself to support the two major party nominees. And it's really a shame because I really want to support a major party, but I really looked into you, and I agree with a lot of what you say, and I guess I really hope you can be a big game changer in this election.
Jaron, thanks for the call. We'll get a response.
Well, I think that the Libertarian Party right now is representing 60% of Americans, and those 60% of Americans I would briefly describe as being fiscally conservative, socially inclusive, skeptical of our wars, and also free trade. That free trade is devoid of crony capitalism. Crony capitalism, by definition, is when government picks winners and losers, and that's political. And the Libertarian Party is representing the opposite of that. Opportunity for all. Those four legs of the stool, I think, right now represent 60% of the American voters. And I do think that Republican Donald Trump, Democrat Hillary Clinton, I think they're out on the fringes. And as reflected by the fact that 60% of Americans view them negatively, there's a reason. They are out on the fringes.
On Twitter, be sure to follow us at C-SPAN. And this is from Hank, who has this tweet for you, Governor Johnson. It reads as follows. How will Gary Johnson work with Congress effectively being a third-party candidate? He adds, I hate that label.
Does anybody think that if Trump or Clinton is elected that the polarization in Congress is going to get any better? I don't think any of us believe that. I think it's going to get worse. Each side has one agenda, and that's to kill the other side. The third scenario, big 6-lane highway down the middle, Libertarian, Gary Johnson, Bill Weld. We're going to hire Democrats, Republicans, Libertarians. It's going to be a nonpartisan administration. Call out both sides to come to the table to deal with issues that the country is facing. I think that third scenario at least has the opportunity of working. I don't think the other two, the first two, don't have any chance whatsoever.
Let's go to John, joining us from North Carolina, supporter of Donald Trump. Good evening, John.
Good evening. Yes. I am a supporter of Donald Trump because of the positions that he has taken on things that are very vital to our future. I'm very concerned about the immigration or lack of work to make our immigration laws work, and I think he would work to improve that. I'm very concerned about the fact that our military has been cut way back under the current administration, and no indication that there'll be any change there, while our adversaries are building up their military forces. And so I don't like the way he says things sometimes, but I do believe that his policies are better.
Governor Johnson, what would you say to John?
Well, I think we should be embracing immigration. And as a border state governor, I will tell you that workers from Mexico are really the cream of the crop. And they're not taking jobs that U.S. citizens want. The main reason for 11 million undocumented workers is the fact that government sets quotas, and those you can't get a work visa to get across the border. And so they're coming across the border to take jobs that U.S. citizens don't want, something that you and I would do if that's what we had to do for our families. We should make it as easy as possible for somebody that wants to come into this country and work to be able to get a work visa. A work visa should entail a background check and a Social Security card, that applicable taxes get paid. Don't build a wall across the border. In New Mexico, where the population is 50% Hispanic, how is a crackdown of 11 million undocumented workers going to work in New Mexico? Is it going to be a door-to-door, knock on the door, let's see your papers, and if you don't have your papers, what's going to happen then? Look, I think he's just completely out of touch when he talks about immigration. And then with regard to the military, look, I share your same concerns. We should have an invincible national defense, but when we involve ourselves as the world's policemen, I think we diminish our role. We're not as effective. It costs a whole lot of money with no clear objectives at the end of any of this, and the world ends up to be less safe. Look, let's concentrate on making our country safe, on defending our country. Let's have clear, defined goals for our military.
Let me pick up on that point. One of the questions from one of the participants in the town hall meeting format at Washington University in St. Louis, Missouri, was from a Muslim American, making the point 3.3 million Muslims living in the U.S., and asking this question: how will you, now this is aimed at Donald Trump, but I'm going to phrase it to you, Governor Johnson, how will you help people like me deal with the consequences of being labeled as a threat to the country after the election is over?
Well, I'm not going to label you a threat to this country. I'm going to label you as an asset to this country, just like all immigrants to this country are assets. So it starts with a commander-in-chief that's going to be talking about these issues in particular in the way that I'm talking about, that immigration is really a good thing. This is not a country that should be discriminating against any group whatsoever. When we do that, it has a bad consequence, and we should be working to overcome that discrimination. And as president, I will work to overcome that discrimination.
You probably saw the numbers from the very latest NBC News Wall Street Journal poll that has Hillary Clinton now with the lead. This is a national survey among likely voters. You now are at 9%. According to the Commission on Presidential Debates, you need to be at 15% to participate. There is one more debate. Do you sense any movement that would allow you to be on the stage next week in Las Vegas?
Well, anything can happen. Maybe with this showing here on C-SPAN, thank you very much, Steve. This might push it over the top. But it's a hard road to push if you're not in the presidential debates. I take great solace, I take great pride in leading among young people right now. Now, by leading, I guess I'm tied with Hillary Clinton, but coming from nowhere to be tied among young people, I think come Election Day, that could actually swing to carrying young people. I'm leading among independents, the largest political identified allegiance right now in this country, and like I said earlier, leading among active military personnel, which although is not a very big demographic, who but they should know what's going on and what direction this country should take militarily.
Randall has this tweet, a question with regard to the U.S. Supreme Court. His question, Governor Johnson, what are your top considerations for a Supreme Court judge, or in this case, of course, justice?
Well, we actually had a list today that we released, but at the top of that list is Jonathan Turley from George Washington University, Tom Campbell, who is a dean at Chapman University. Constitutional law, looking at the Constitution from the standpoint of original intent.
Let's go to Sneh, who's joining us from New City, New York, a supporter of Hillary Clinton. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Yes, hello.
Good evening.
Good evening. I am generally, basically, a independent mind, but I am leaning toward Hillary Clinton. The reason, I am disgusting with the Trump thing, like he's racist, he's lying every 5 minutes, and, all these tapes, he calling locker room. How about the Howard Stern show, national TV? What kind of bad thing he say? He just wanted to date his daughter, he wanted to make out, all kind of things. Is it that America we stand for? What we can tell our children in the future? I mean, how we can explain them, with these kind of stuff, It's such a, disgusting things when I feel, what this man, does he know? And like Mr. Johnson just said, like he said that 11 million people he want to deport, how he going to label them? Knock door to door, or he just making a fool of American public? So, those kind of things. A president should have some graceful things and nice words and everything. He get very revengeful. If things doesn't go in his way, he just get very revengeful. He has a pattern. You may look at Megyn Kelly. He got upset. The pastor, the black pastor in church, he got upset. The judge is Mexican. The son of the POW. Every single person, he has a bad comment for those people. So it is so sad, how this is not the America we want. This is not the America stand for. They have a values.
Sneh, thank you. I'm going to jump in, give Governor Johnson a chance to respond and talk about the overall tone of this campaign. Thank you for your call and your participation. Governor Johnson.
Well, I just agree with, I would just agree with everything it is that you said about Donald Trump. I would just add that when it comes to Hillary Clinton, there isn't anything that government won't be able to solve in the future. When it comes to Hillary Clinton, she's going to grow government. Neither Hillary nor Trump want to address the entitlements, Medicaid and Medicare. Reform the entitlements so they're actually around for young people. I don't think it's an option to say, let's do nothing with those programs, and actually Hillary's saying that we should expand those programs. I don't think it's an option to say that we should not look at reforming Social Security so that it will actually be around for young people. And then I'm particularly disturbed with these latest revelations, which is the hypocrisy of Hillary Clinton, saying one thing and doing another, talking to Wall Street privately, telling them that, look, ordinary people don't understand these issues, but you and I do, and we'll make it through. I think the one unforgivable in life is hypocrisy, saying one thing and doing another.
From the town hall meeting on Sunday, one of the participants saying that the Affordable Care Act is not affordable, adding, what would you do to bring costs down and make coverage better? And let me add to that this tweet that we have from Nick, who's also asking about health care. He wants to know about pre-existing conditions. What would you do specifically? So on these two big issues, your thoughts, Governor Johnson.
Well, there needs to be reform to the Affordable Health Care Act, that we should bring competition. I think government could play a really big role in bringing competition, more competition to health care. More competition would be ultimately better health care, advertised pricing, advertised outcomes, something that currently doesn't exist. Look, pre-existing condition is an issue that this country was and is facing, and I think it can be taken care of. And if that ends up to be a government subsidy, which currently, you know, it's layered right now, but currently that is a government subsidy at present. But that is a very real issue. Healthcare reform, I happen to agree with Chief Justice Roberts that the Affordable Health Care Act is a tax. My health insurance premiums have quadrupled. I went to see a doctor here about 3 weeks ago to get a physical because I'm running for president, but until then I hadn't been to see a doctor for years prior to that. Look, we could bring competition to health care. We could blow the lid off the supply of doctors. So much is being made about the fact that there aren't enough doctors to go around. Well, that could be a government subsidy when it comes to medical schools and their ability to turn out more doctors. That we should be dealing with health care from the front end, not after the consequences of poor diet, no exercise, after the consequences of those ingredients come down then on the healthcare system, and now we have to deal with diabetes, we have to deal with heart failure, smoking, you know, we have to deal with the consequence of smoking, on and on and on. Bring competition, more competition to health care. As President of the United States, I'll sign any legislation that I believe makes health care more affordable and increases a way to lower costs. If we opened, for example, if we opened up our ability to buy prescriptions from Canada, because they're cheaper from Canada, which I would support in a nanosecond, but how long would prices remain expensive in the United States if we did that? They wouldn't remain expensive at all, because that competition from abroad, competition brings about lower prices.
Let's go to Darlene. She is a supporter of the Johnson Weld ticket in Cincinnati, Ohio. Good evening.
Hello, Governor Johnson. I'm honored to speak with you, and I was so relieved when I found out about 3 months ago that we had another option besides Clinton and Trump. And I've been impressed with the information that I've gotten off your website, especially the fact that you cut taxes when you were governor 14 times, and that you left the state with new highways and bridges and schools and hospitals. And I am a firm supporter and have been telling as many people as I can about you. I think it's a crime that the Commission for Presidential Debates has shut you and the other candidates off from the debates. I think that is worthy of the lawsuit that's been filed against them. And I hope that when that lawsuit comes to trial, that they'll be found to have to pay a lot of taxes for the fact that they've been masquerading as a nonprofit agency.
Thank you for the call.
Well, one thing that Bill Weld and I are going to bring when it comes to small government is certainty. Taxes are not going to go up. We're pledging to submit a balanced budget to Congress in the first 100 days. Why a balanced budget? Well, a balanced budget is all about the future of this country. A balanced budget is for young people. The fact that I'm going to get my health care, I'm going to get my retirement, but guess what? You as young people, who's to say if it's going to be around? The Affordable Health Care Act that relies on healthy people subsidizing those that aren't so healthy. Well, guess what? That disparagingly falls on young people also. And it's young people that we're putting in harm's way with our military policies, with our intervention regime change policies that are putting young people in harm's way. So I think all of this is really geared toward the future, and all of this, the libertarian agenda, is equality for all. You touched on the Presidential Debate Commission made up of Republicans and Democrats, and they just have no interest whatsoever in seeing anyone other than a Democrat or a Republican on stage. Amazingly, this is something that I just found out a couple of weeks ago, I'm actually polling higher than Ross Perot was polling when he was allowed into the presidential debates. Now, initially, he was polling very high, then he dropped out of the race. After he dropped out of the race, he was polling lower than I am right now. He was allowed into the presidential debates because both Clinton and Bush saw it as an advantage that he was in those debates. Well, after those debates, the Presidential Debate Commission set a threshold that without being in the presidential debates, a real chicken and egg thing, without being in the presidential debates, you cannot garner that level of support.
We are at the midway point of a one-hour conversation with Governor Gary Johnson. He is the Libertarian Party nominee. In our next hour, a conversation with the Green Party nominee and her running mate. And we want to remind our audience that the speeches by Governor Johnson from his acceptance speech at the Libertarian Convention on our website. You can check it out online anytime at cspan.org. We welcome our listeners on C-SPAN Radio, and we have a tweet from Jennifer who wants to know specifically about our voting system. She writes, "What would you do as president to reform our election process, campaigns, and voting systems?" How do you answer that?
Well, I'd very simply like to see just a majority elect the President of the United States. I understand the reasons for the Electoral College, but here it is. We could conceivably have this vote go to the Electoral College. I think it's outgrown its usefulness. That would be a starter. I also like ranked voting, where you can vote for a couple of candidates as opposed to one, and I think that's a way to break the two-party system also. And when I say break the two-party system, Democrats 28%, Republicans 26%, Independents 43%, Libertarians, Greens making up the rest. Really, Democrats and Republicans have outgrown their representation.
In the first debate, the first question by NBC's Lester Holt dealt specifically with jobs and manufacturing and wanted to know specifically what each candidate would do to create more jobs in the U.S. What would you do?
Well, Steve, in the 2012 cycle, when I ran for president, Rick Perry was beating his chest over the fact that he had created more jobs than anybody else running for president in 2012. And you know what? He did a really good job. But turns out I actually had the best record when it came to jobs. And my response in 2012, same as it is today. Look, government doesn't create jobs. The private sector does. But I think I contributed mightily to this notion of equal opportunity. I vetoed a lot of legislation that was going to give advantage to those that already had advantage. Government is for sale. Crony capitalism is when government picks winners and losers. Well, if government doesn't pick winners and losers, then you have this equality by everyone. Everyone can equally compete. So what I'm offering is certainty. Taxes are not going to go up. Rules and regulations are just going to get better. And I am not getting elected dictator or king. I'm getting elected President of the United States, but I would advocate elimination of income tax and corporate tax, replacing those taxes with one federal consumption tax. I put out there for your examination fair tax. Get on the internet, check out fair tax. It's been a proposal that's been around for about 10 years. Every year about 80 congressmen and women sign on to it. It dots the I's and it crosses the T's on how you accomplish one federal consumption tax. Bottom line, I think it would be fair. Bottom line, I think it would create tens of millions of jobs in this country because of a zero corporate tax. And let's not kid ourselves, you and I pay for corporate tax. Corporations don't pay for corporate tax.
Let's go to Ted from Bedford, Virginia, supporter of Hillary Clinton. You're next.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for taking my call,
Hi.
Governor Johnson. I've got to say, I can't really call myself a Clinton supporter, but I will certainly be voting for her. But I've got to say, your humility and honesty are very refreshing. I really like it. My question is, do you agree with the vast number of climate scientists, some 96 or 97%, in every survey they do, that same number keeps up, that say that climate change is real and humans are causing it? First, do you agree with them, first of all? And
yes.
Regardless,
yes.
Okay, thank you. Regardless of your question, I'm sorry, I've got it written this down. If we assume they are correct, what are your solutions to it? Does government have a role? And if private enterprise is going to take care of it alone, how exactly would that work? That's pretty much my question. Thank you for taking it.
Well, yeah. Well, right now, I think that you and I as consumers are demanding less carbon emission, and we're getting that. With regard to World Paris Accord, for example, I don't see how it's achievable. I really don't. I mean, I think it's set unrealistic goals. We're 16% of the world's carbon emission. Carbon doesn't know any boundaries. So I don't want to get out front on this to the point that the U.S. loses jobs as a result of being out front on this, but I do think that consumers will drive less carbon emission in a really big way. Coal is a good example. Marginal coal assets have been bankrupted. The coal that is currently online is supplying what is 36% of the current U.S. electrical load. But why would you build a coal-fired plant today as low as the price of coal has been depressed? Even lower is the price of natural gas. So why build a coal plant if you can build a natural gas plant for less money? Well, that's the market at work, and that is a cleaner planet.
Let's turn to drugs. You've been a very vocal proponent of drug legalization. This is from David Lawson, who has a specific question on that. He says, what would you say about your support for drug legalization to parents of children lost to drug addiction?
Well, first of all, the only drug that I have advocated legalizing, and this is since 1999, being the highest elected official in the United States to call for the legalization of marijuana, but that's the only one that I'm calling for the legalization of is marijuana. I think we're going to do that as a country, and when we do that, I think we're going to come to a quantum leap of understanding when it comes to the drug issue. And that quantum leap will be to understand drugs first as a health issue rather than a criminal justice issue. So when you talk about overdose, when you talk about death due to drugs, what we're concerned with is death, disease, crime, and corruption. And 90% of that is related to prohibition. Quality, quantity, unknown, dirty needles which lead to HIV, hepatitis C, the fact that it is legal, you've got to indulge in prostitution, guns come out because disputes are played out with guns rather than the courts. So legalizing marijuana, then the big recognition, hey, it's a health issue, not a criminal justice issue. For all of those that have died due to overdose, look, that's tragic, but it's quality, quantity, unknown. It's prohibition that kills.
Do you find any benefits from using marijuana yourself personally?
Well, I have. I have not had a drink of alcohol in 30 years. My life really is health and wellness. Comparing alcohol, though, to marijuana, I think that marijuana is way safer than everything else that's out there, starting with alcohol. And I'd like to point out that the campaign to legalize marijuana in Colorado, the campaign was based on marijuana is safer than alcohol, which I believe that it is. But look, I begrudge no one taking the edge off of the day by consuming marijuana, nor do I begrudge anyone taking the edge off the day by consuming alcohol. It's just don't take that impairment if you get impaired and get behind the wheel of a car. That's where government needs to have a role and will have a role. Look, impairment is not an excuse to do harm to someone else.
Let's go to John, joining us from Phoenix, Arizona, supporter of Donald Trump. Good evening. Welcome to the program.
Hi. I'd like to have any president, including you, that could answer the question regarding all the construction jobs that have been lost since this housing market dived, why Americans are not on our construction sites. I do know why, because of the fact that the new home builders are taking advantage of the fact that people are having to break the law. They're using W-9 forms to hire people to be on builder sites. And then 90% of the people that are filling out this form turns into a 1099 at the end of the year, and IRS collects these forms, and they're fake. 90% of them are using fake Social Security numbers. These are thousands of jobs on our construction sites being lost, and I'm wondering why no president has talked about all the jobs that are lost by the middle class through new home builders that are taking advantage of the fact that laws are being not being enforced, and we're losing our jobs.
John, thank you.
Well, first of all, I don't know if you know my history, but I started a one-man handyman business in Albuquerque in 1974 and actually grew that business to employ over 1,000 people, electrical, mechanical, plumbing, pipe fitting. Some of the best workers that I had were immigrants, and I maintain that. I also maintain that it's not an issue of lower pay unless it's an issue of language, and they're the first ones that recognize that. They're taking jobs that U.S. citizens don't want. You rightfully describe the hoop jumping that goes on with false documentation that they present to get these jobs. I'd like to see work visas issued, make this something that's upfront, that it doesn't have to be illegal. But a great untold story also is that these taxes get collected from immigrants that are presenting false documentation, and the taxes are never collected. So they are contributing to the system in a big way and not actually taking advantage of what they're paying into.
Governor Johnson, another question from the first presidential debate dealt with income inequality and pointing out that many Americans are living from paycheck to paycheck. So what could you do? What is the role of government to boost the income of the American people and the tax code in this country that may help the American people, and also to the earlier point about creating jobs?
Well, so Steve, something that I always want, I want to give people the following advice. And the advice I have to give is that take whatever it is that you know and apply it entrepreneurially. Create your own job. Create jobs for others. Well, there's probably a collective scoff at that because of how difficult it is to do that. Well, government can play a role in making that a lot easier. So if what people are looking for is income equality, Peter taking from Paul, I don't know if government is going to ever be able to step in and make that equitable. But if people are looking for equal opportunity, where you can compete equally with somebody else. And I think a great example of that right now is the internet. Look, as individuals, all of us are on par with every single other individual on the planet because of the internet. I think the model for the future is Uber everything. It's eliminating the middleman. It's allowing you as the entrepreneur to deliver your goods and services to the end user. End user pays less money because there's not a middleman. You as the provider of goods and services, you end up to make more money because there's not a middleman. I do think this is the model of the future, and there are assaults by government, by legislation. Hillary does not want to see Uber, doesn't want to see Airbnb. I was talking to a young lady in Baltimore who got her PhD in science. She said, I have these horrendous student debts. I figured out a way to pay for them. I started renting out my place, Airbnb. But the city of Baltimore stepped in and said, nope, can't do it, not allowed. Well, that's government standing in the way of what I think is just the tip of the iceberg of the sharing economy that's out there. Get government out of the equation. Government plays a role. Health, safety, equality, making sure that no one harms anyone else. In that context, though, government can also ensure that I'm on par with everybody else. I'm not at a disadvantage because I've never attempted to do something.
We'll go to Katie, one of your supporters. She's joining us from Navaron, Pennsylvania. You're next.
Hey, Gary.
Hey.
One of the main complaints that I hear about your campaign is that you're not more open to combating environmental issues. Are you willing to consider opening your mind to this, and specifically how so, or on what grounds?
You're saying that I'm not open to combating environmental issues? I support the EPA. I think government has a fundamental role to protect us against individuals, groups, corporations, foreign governments that would do us harm. And I put pollution in the category of harm. I put the EPA as kind of a forefront of protecting us against polluters. In New Mexico, as governor of New Mexico, there was a major polluter of a river in northern New Mexico. That pollution, metals contamination, mining enterprise had gone on for decades. They refused to acknowledge that they were even responsible for the metals contamination in the first place. I shut them down because my biggest anvil was the Environmental Protection Agency. And look, if you're not going to come to the table in 30 days, I'm going to turn you over to federal EPA and you're going to become a Superfund site. And that's exactly what happened. So I'd like to think that, I'm going to stand up against polluters, and I believe in the health and safety of you and I as citizens of this country. And health and safety, look, pollution flies in the face of health and safety.
Gary Johnson is a graduate of the University of New Mexico. He served as the governor of that state from 1995 until 2003. This next topic has been the most tweeted topic over the last hour. It deals with education and college costs. This is from Adam, who says, what is your proposal to deal with the rising cost of universities and student loan debt?
Well, I think that the main reason for the high cost of college tuition is guaranteed government student loans. If guaranteed government student loans never would have existed, college tuition today, I believe, would be half of what it is right now. So government has interjected itself, picking winners and losers. Winners, in this case, colleges and universities that are absolutely immune from having to price their products in a way that if you didn't have a guaranteed government student loan, you'd stand back and really question the affordability of college. And ultimately, the prices, like I say, would be much lower. I think students have been sold a bill of goods when it comes to student loans, and that they are graduating from college with a home mortgage without the home. I'd be open to legislation that would fix the interest rates in line with the bailout from Wall Street, believing that this is a catastrophe that's looming out there. And doing away with guaranteed government student loans isn't going to do away with student loans. It's just going to put it over on the private sector. And if you did all that, college tuitions would drop dramatically.
Quick question from another viewer with regard to 2020, 4 years from now. Wondering if you don't make it in this election, would you consider running again?
No, I think I've been given a really a good shot here, and there's still the possibility of making this happen. Like I say, this C-SPAN appearance right now, if this doesn't do it, I don't know what will. But no, I've been given my shot. 2012, 1.3 million votes, 1%. Momentum has continued. Momentum is really pretty darn straight up, and in spite of all the odds, we're in there. We're contending at the moment. But 2020, I think there'll be a slew of Libertarian candidates that that will come along that will really be exciting, and I'll look forward to that. But I'll look forward to that as an observer and not a participant.
We have wanted to focus primarily on public policy issues in this campaign, but two political questions. First, your running mate, Governor Bill Weld, saying he wants to do whatever he can to make sure that Donald Trump is not elected. Is he doing enough to help you in this election to make a dent in 2016?
Oh, absolutely. Bill Weld, before we got together running as a ticket here for the Libertarian Party, we were pretty good friends. We're best friends now. I hold Bill Weld up on a pedestal, and that he wants to keep Donald Trump from being president. He wants to keep Donald Trump from being president as much as I don't want to see Hillary Clinton as president. So we have a pretty balanced ticket.
And former Congressman Ron Paul, who was the 1988 Libertarian nominee, said that Jill Stein is more progressive than you. What would you say to Congressman Paul?
Well, that's Congressman Paul's progressive on the social side. Economically, I think Jill and I agree on a whole lot of topics, but I think when it comes to economics, Jill and I come to a T in the road. And if what Ron Paul is saying is that she's more progressive on social issues, well, that's his opinion. If she's saying she's better on the issues from an economic standpoint, I'd be surprised if he were saying that.
Let's go to David, joining us from Bell, California, supporter of Hillary Clinton. Good evening.
Hi, Governor Johnson. I'm actually never been registered for any political party. That's how I've conducted myself as a citizen. And I'm a little concerned. At the beginning of the show, the host asked you about who would you appoint, for example, as a foreign secretary. I think that's a pretty important question to ask, and I don't know if your answer was sufficient. Now, I'm supporting Hillary Clinton this year because I trust her. I obviously don't support Trump. I trust you on social issues, but I'm not sure that's good enough to get me to vote for you. And I could totally vote for you, given that I live in a county where the Democratic Party is going to win it hands down. Now, let me ask you two questions. What's your position on the inheritance tax and why? And then as it relates to foreign policy, how would you, for example, deal with a President Rodrigo Duterte who's antagonizing the United States? Thank you.
Thank you, David. 2 points.
Well, I think the latter question, Philippine president, I think he's going to see a greatly diminished tourist trade with the United States. That's just my guess. And that unless he adjusts his dialogue or people get him out of office, I think the Philippines will suffer as a result of tourism dropping in Philippines. That's just my prediction. And the things that he is doing from a human rights standpoint, I would stand up to what he is doing from a human rights standpoint, and this crackdown on drugs resulting in the deaths of a whole lot of people. So I would certainly, I'd certainly engage in the dialogue against what he is doing if I were elected President of the United States. And back to Hillary and
the inheritance tax.
Inheritance tax. Thank you. So inheritance tax, I think it's one of those issues where lower middle class, I realize that for the most part they're able to pass that money on because of the limits that do exist. But ideally, we would not have that tax. Ideally, if we were to eliminate income tax and corporate tax and replace all of it with one federal consumption tax, we would not have a deduction for Social Security, we would not have a deduction for unemployment, we would not have a deduction for Medicaid, and the inheritance tax would go by the wayside, and all those other those other revenues would come from the proceeds of one federal consumption tax.
We'll get one more call. This is from Ricky in DeSoto, Missouri. Good evening.
Hi. So this is, good evening, Mr. Johnson, to you as well. I'm 19 years old, and I'm very open-minded, and this is my first presidential election that I can partake in. And I must say this election is an insult to human intelligence. The United States government is using our love for the land against us to create problems in our own homes. We're force-fed information in schools, and then kids have to compete on standardized tests to be graded like meat. I think the minds of the youth are the backbone to our planet's existence. It seems as if the youth have had absolutely no say in high political positions for important subjects involving our home and well-being. Do you have anything in mind on how the youth can be eventually involved into government?
Well, I do, and I'll point out the obvious here is that young people, 18 through 34, have only grown up with the internet. My generation, other older generations, have grown up seeing everything through a filter. Because you haven't seen anything through a filter, I think you really kind of cut through the clutter more than any other group. I'm believing that's the case because I'm tied for the lead among your demographic. I'm hoping that's the case. So young people have really been sold or right now the attempt is to sell you all a bill of goods. Expanding Medicaid and Medicare, doing nothing when it comes to Social Security, continuing a foreign policy that puts you in harm's way. I think you're bearing the brunt of all of this, and all of this is going to come to a crashing conclusion because we just simply cannot continue to print money to cover things that we can't pay for. The horrible tax at the end of all of this, the breakdown, will be just a whiplash inflation. That the money that you've saved will be worth an incredible, the money you've saved will be worth a much lower amount, literally overnight, because that is how this is going to manifest itself. A lot more money chasing same goods and services is going to result in much, much higher prices, and that's the demise of most countries like ourselves. We have a chance here to deal with it. But let's deal with it. It's not an option to say, let's do nothing. It's not an option to expand these programs.
Let me conclude with this question. For you personally, what is a bigger challenge, running for president or scaling Mount Everest?
Steve, I think they're one and the same. It's one foot in front of the other, and going to Everest and actually getting to the summit. Look, getting to the summit was going to be a real plus, but being there, being fit enough, being in a position, staying safe, working your way, look, there are a lot of factors beyond your control, but that I was there and was actually successful in that endeavor. It was a process. Running for president is a process. It's the same thing. One foot in front of the other. Life is all about dealing with failure. How we deal with failure ultimately determines success. Do you crawl up in a ball, declare yourself a victim, or do you get up the next day with a smile on your face, recognizing that it is a process? I'm the latter. I wake up every day with a smile. It's a process. Setbacks are what we deal with all the time. Let's just deal with them. I deal with them.
Joining us from Santa Fe, New Mexico this last hour, former Governor Gary Johnson, the 2016 Libertarian nominee. Governor, thank you for being with us here on C-SPAN. We appreciate it.
Steve, thank you very much.
When we come back, we'll turn our attention to the Green Party nominee and her running mate here in Washington, D.C. to take your calls, and another hour looking at two of the leading third-party candidates in this election. We're back in a moment.